freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Welcome to episode number 112 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, the biggest little gun shop in Arizona. And I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. We have a great show today. Our theme is Memorial Day, Decoration Day.
Yeah, so Memorial Day and Decoration Day. We are in the studio recording on Memorial Day, and this show won't air until a few days after Memorial Day has passed. But as we sit here today, I want to reflect on the meaning and the significance of Memorial Day. We have become so comfortable in our country with taking all that we have for granted. Even saying that phrase, taking it for granted, it washes over our ears as a meaningless and overused ism. When we take something for granted, we feel entitled to it. We do not believe that it requires any action, any attention, or any effort for that thing to be. And because it is effortlessly available to us, we also do not feel any special appreciation for it. We didn't even break a sweat, and yet we have every advantage of it. We didn't lift a finger or chip a nail, and yet we are the direct recipients of the blessings of it. In the case of Memorial Day, or as it is also known, Decoration Day, on this and every day, we have all of the advantages that America offers, all of the freedoms and all of the struggles. We have a country that people literally die trying to come to. It is unlike any other patch of earth that has ever or likely will ever exist on the globe. And why is that? The key is found in the reasons that we have a special day set aside called Memorial Day. And far too many of us don't even know why this day exists or what we should do to commemorate it. Do we celebrate Memorial Day or do we observe Memorial Day? I suggest that we do both. Memorial Day is the 24-hour period that we Americans pause and reflect on the men and women who wore the uniforms of our various armed forces and died while wearing those uniforms in service to their fellow men and women, countrymen and women. So we observe, we pray, we honor, and we remember the lives lost and the families changed due to the dedication unto death of so many millions of people who have given all. We also celebrate. We celebrate the fruits of their efforts, their labors, and their sacrifices. But mostly, and this is my personal challenge to myself and my fellow Americans, we must live in such a way as to have made their sacrifice worth it. We must unite our United States. We must learn and value our Constitution and protect and defend those ideals and values laid out by our forefathers. Not one of them is disposable, and not one of them is to be trampled on by the selfish ambition of politicians and those who would have Americans live under the thumb of big government and held in the stranglehold of tyranny. Those of us who value and seek to protect and preserve the Second Amendment most especially bear the responsibility of teaching our children and our children's children what this day means. As Ronald Reagan said, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. We do not pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, defended, and then handed down to them with the well-taught lessons for them to do the same. Because if you and I don't do this, then you and I might well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men and women were free. So, as you observe and as you celebrate, please be mindful that none of what we enjoy and struggle through as Americans can be taken for granted, and stand with me in deep reverence and prayer for the sacrifices that others have made on our behalf every single day, but most especially on this day that we know as Memorial Day. Dan?
Wow, I don't know what to say about that. We don't realize what our country, what it took to make our country what it is today.
It's so true. I mean, we were just at an amazing event that our first guest that's coming up today set up for us, where we met with people from museums all across the world, really. And as they talked about their different collections and the purpose for their different museums, you and I realized, oh man, we are so behind the curve on knowing even our own history, much less the histories of some of the other countries that were represented at this event. And it's a dang shame.
Right. I mean, we're watching Turn right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had it all wrong.
The Washington Spies
Yes.
Netflix show. It's so good.
I had it all
I love
wrong.
it.
And I'm embarrassed to say that, I thought that 4th of July, 1776, that was the year we gained our, freedom.
Gained the independence, yeah. It's when we
But it
started
wasn't.
fighting for it.
Right,
It's when we
that's when we-
declared it.
Right. And so I don't know if it's my fault or the school's fault for not teaching me, but, watching that story, I mean, I know that it's dramatized and stuff, but there's a lot of points that helps us to remember what it took to make our country what it is today.
Absolutely. And even recommending like a Netflix show, clearly they're going to twist and bend some history in there, but at least gets you like your appetite whetted for, wait, I want to know, is that thing that they just showed us, is that factual? Did that happen?
Right. It makes you go look for the answers.
Absolutely.
So, hey, we've got a great lineup today.
We
Our
do.
first hour, we have in studio Ashley Hlebinsky. She is the Robert W. Woodruff Curator of the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Ashley is the first female firearm curator at the most prestigious firearms museum in the United States, and she is a recipient of the NSSF POMA Gresham Shooting Sports Communicator of the Year Award. Ashley just hosted a gathering of museum creators from across the globe on the topic of ethics of firearms in museums, and there was a lot of interest. We got to go to that.
It was amazing.
Right. So
Because maybe someday you want to own a museum. And I
Well-
don't know. I'm maybe even a little less sure now after hearing what they go through.
Right.
There's a lot
Who
that
would-
they go through.
who would think that museums have issues with firearms?
Right. Well,
So, you
something
got,
to think about.
Yeah, it was a good deep look into what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Beth Bauman. Beth is a social media writer at Town Hall Media, where she runs everything evening and weekend social media for the network. She also contributes frequently to Town Hall's notebook section and Twitchy. Never heard that before. Beth recently wrote an article about measures being taken by the UN to impact the gun rights of American citizens. This is the UN that's doing this.
Mm-hmm. And if we don't know our history and we don't know our rights and don't know our Constitution, then we go, okay, somebody's really smart out there knows better than we do, so we'll just roll with it.
No. No. We're not going to just roll with it.
Good. Who else is coming on?
On our second hour, we have Alan Krutchkoff. He's the president of Adopt-a-Soldier Platoon, Incorporated, which supports Camp 4 Heroes. This nonprofit charity has been improving the morale of American warriors in harm's way since 2003. And Camp 4 Heroes is a retreat for life in North Carolina aimed at suicide prevention. Then we have Alan Coren, who is a prolific writer, owner of Bloomfield Press, and leading expert in United States gun laws. Alan wrote an article recently in CJR concerning censorship via lack of competition in our news sources. That's interesting, a lack of competition.
Right. So if there's not somebody out there to counterbalance, right?
Right.
Some of the news, hashtag fake news, that goes on out there.
Then all the news is true, Cheryl. Come on. Everything's true.
Go on.
We also have Robert Morse, author of Slow Facts blog and co-host of the Polite Society podcast. Rob recently wrote an article titled, "We Are Paying to Get Our Kids Murdered," in which he takes issues with the celebritizing of murderers. I guess that's like rap and whatever.
No, he's talking about when one of these horrible mass murders take place, like in high schools, that they plaster the face and the name of the murderer all over the place. And so then the next unbalanced individual out there who is looking for some way to make his life significant, they lean towards that and they say, well, this is how I can matter. This is how I can be part of history.
Right, and then they take somebody who saves a life and they go, there was a story about a guy that, they don't say anything, or they'll put a little blurb in there.
Exactly.
A hero.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's definitely upside down. Well, we also have our Responsibly Armed Citizen Report and Dan's commentary.
Maybe.
Coming up. And so you want to stick around for every minute of today's show. And just real quickly before we go to break, I want to mention that this show is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Find out more and check out all of the great content at selfdefenseradionetwork.net. That's if you like the content that you hear here, where you get to hear what experts think, people that spend their lives working in these fields, you're going to want to check out all the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. Well, let's run to commercial and quickly get back in here so that we can talk with our first guest who has come in the studio, which we love, Miss Ashley Hlebinsky, right after this.
And we're back with Cheryl Todd talking about the huge gun buying event at azfirearms.com. Oh, AZ, I get it, as in Arizona.
Yes, but...
Oh, or AZ, as in everything from A to Z.
Well, yes, that too. But what I'm telling everybody about is that azfirearms.com is having a huge gun buying event to buy your old firearms all across Arizona and everything from A to Z.
That's great news. See, my grandpa left me an old shotgun and it's just sitting on a closet shelf at home, so I can bring that into azfirearms.com and sell my gun?
Absolutely. azfirearms.com buys, sells, trades, and even consigns your old firearms. Any vintage, any style, military, long guns, handguns, hunting, or home protection. Single items or entire collections. We offer the highest value for your used firearms in a safe and friendly environment, staffed by knowledgeable people.
azfirearms.com is in Old Town Avondale off I-10 and Dysart Road. Come on down to the huge gun buying event every day through the end of the month at the biggest little gun shop in Arizona. And for all your firearm and ammo needs, visit azfirearms.com.
I'm Rob Morse from the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. Each week we share stories about men and women who saved lives. Now I am asking you to be a lifesaver as well. The Second Amendment Foundation protects our rights to keep and bear arms. They defend our rights in courts from coast to coast. Today, they need our help. Please go to saf.org and join the Second Amendment Foundation. That's saf.org.
Hi folks, I'm Don Carter. If you're looking for the biggest little gun shop in the West, look to azfirearms.com. They have 1,100 guns in stock and a knowledgeable staff to help you find just the right firearm for you. azfirearms.com is my nationwide hometown gun shop, and you should make it yours too.
Well, I fly that plane, call the Angel Flight. Come on, brother, you're with me tonight.
Welcome back to Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are sponsored by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. Well, you'll notice that's a little bit of special music we have playing today in honor of Memorial Day. It's our theme, and we are actually in the studio on Memorial Day. So we want to pay homage to what that day means, what this day means. And we have a great lineup of guests, starting with our in-studio guest, Ashley Hlebinsky. She is the Robert W. Woodruff Curator of the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Ashley is the first female firearms curator at the most prestigious firearms museum in the United States and the recipient of the NSSF POMA Gresham Shooting Sports Communicator of the Year Award. Ashley just hosted a gathering of museum curators from across the globe on the topic of ethics in ethics of firearms in museums. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited. It was so cool for us to go to Cody because we'd never been there.
Oh, it's gorgeous. And it wasn't snowing, so
yeah. Well, that wind was something else, I'll tell you that. But it really was. It's a beautiful town. It's kind of a little town.
Yes, 9,000 people.
Right? But then there's this Smithsonian style sized quality, massive, gorgeous museum that you get to spend your days in. And that's the Cody Museum is inside of the Buffalo Bill Center. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a 40-acre property, believe it or not. 7-acre roof for the building itself. And there's the 5 museums, including the Cody Firearms Museum, which I run. And then there's a full-scale research library there. And so it's a very, very large institution for a small town. And we get about 200,000 people there every year. A lot of them on their way to Yellowstone because we're at the East Gate.
And we didn't take time to get to Yellowstone, but on our way out of town, somebody said, "Oh, you didn't go to Yellowstone? It's like an hour from here." And I'm like, "No, don't tell me that."
52 miles.
So it's a reason many, many reasons to go back. And anyone that is looking for something to do with your family over the summer, I mean, holy cow, there's so much to do. The town itself, there's not like a ton to do, but you've got Yellowstone right there. And there's so much history.
Well, in the museum itself, if you buy admission to the museum, it's a 2-day admission. There is a ton to do no matter what you like because of the different institutions. And then there's a rodeo every night, which I don't think it's started up yet, but every night in the summer. So there is stuff to do in the town. There's whitewater rafting. This is my plug for the town of Cody, Wyoming.
No doubt. Well, and then you had arranged for all of us to spend a couple of hours at a place called the Cody Firearms Experience.
Yes.
Is so beautifully named because it was an experience.
Yeah, that place is relatively new. And last year when we hosted the symposium, we took all the curators out there because a lot of us were, academics. We don't get out to the range as much as people would think. And their focus is in historical firearms, but they have branched out and they do have more modern guns as well. And so if you're, coming through the town, you want to shoot a flintlock, which you did.
Yes, first time ever. It was awesome.
Or if you want to shoot a Tommy gun, in a very safe, controlled environment, it's a really good opportunity that you don't get everywhere.
Well, and I don't know if it was special for us or not, but each of the stations where you'd walk up to shoot the firearm, the man or woman who was manning that station gave us like a brief synopsis of the history of the firearm and, what time in history it was brought about and how it was used. And I thought that was amazing because I'm always looking for that teaching moment or teachable moment.
Well, and that range is all about education. I mean, that's their main goal. Obviously, it functions as a regular indoor shooting range the rest of the year, and if it's not busy, but it is there for education, historical education during the summer season.
Well, the flintlock was great, but I do have to nickname it Face Full of Fire Rifle because big old flash comes up right in front of your face, and I'm like, how are my eyebrows? Are they there? They still
Without, yeah, facial hair can sometimes be a little bit of a struggle. And if you look at the older guns before the true flintlocks, the cock actually comes towards you with the spark, and
Oh,
so
gosh.
I feel like they learned something from
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
Cheryl had a very nice tan after she shot that gun.
It's true. Well, and we own a Gatling gun, but we've never taken it out shooting. And
Oh,
they
really?
had one there that I got to crank the handle on, and it was so cool. Dan played my cameraman, so
Yeah.
I'll have to get
I
those
didn't-
videos
She
up.
wouldn't let me shoot.
You didn't shoot, Dad?
No, she wouldn't let me.
That's not true.
I tried. I really wanted to shoot the Gatling gun. I've never shot one
Oh,
before.
so pitiful you. Okay, so let's talk about this symposium. I learned so much during that time. Not even so much about, what is in each person's collection or museum, but like all the behind the scenes stuff. Like, you've got this particular item, this tool, firearms, and it holds a special place, may I say stigma, right?
Yeah.
In America and throughout the world. And you curators have to figure out how to traverse the landscape between politics and showing history it just is. You're not trying to glorify anything. You're hopefully not trying to downplay anything. Like, how do you talk about that?
It's not a simple answer, but basically the symposium started last year. This is the second year for it, and the conversations that we had our first year made us realize that we need to keep talking, because there isn't a standard avenue to study firearms history in a way that you would if you wanted to be an art historian. You kind of have to get creative in graduate school, and there aren't a lot of people who are academically trained in the study of firearms and then also trained in museums. And so we got everyone together last year and then this year. And I mean, we've had people everywhere from the Smithsonian to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Last year we had the Art Institute of Chicago there. We had a professor from the Art Institute. This year, the NRA Museum was there. You had so many different institutions represented, international institutions like the Dutch Military Museum and the Royal Armories in England. And what's fascinating is they all have different missions. They all have different collections, and they all interpret different kind of periods in history. Some just interpret them for their aesthetic value. But we all have learned that no matter what, the firearms collections, no matter what type of institution you have, tend to be the most publicly popular. But they're the least respected academically. And so we realized last year from our conversation that every person in that room, represented a different range of political beliefs, which is really neat, but all united by the fact that we need to preserve and understand firearms history. And we all do it in different ways, but that we need to keep the conversation going. And so we decided this year to focus it specifically on ethics of firearms in museums. And that was everything from, the mundane of, who gets access to the collections and how do you navigate that, to, what is the role, if any, of firearms museums and firearms collections in the current gun debate. So it really kind of ranged the spectrum, but I think it was some really good conversations.
It was amazing conversations for me, especially because we aren't museum curators. We hope to someday take some of the collection that Dan has amassed and put it in that form rather than in the retail form that we have now with AZ Firearms. But so many things, like, we heard several of the curators say a lot of times the first question out of people's minds when they're looking at the firearms collections is, has that specific gun that I'm looking at ever been used to harm or kill someone? And what I thought when I heard that was, does anybody ever ask that about the swords?
It's something that I was talking to the Royal Armories curator on a break about because I don't know, because I don't really have a vast sword collection, but there is a different kind of relationship that you see with people with different types of weaponry. A lot of times with the swords, you'll talk about like blood marks on the swords, and it's just kind of a different thing, although a way more personal weapon, because you have to get hand to hand with that person. And so I actually do want to study more in depth kind of that transition of the different types of military arms that you see and how they're perceived by the public, because it is a little bit different depending on what the subject matter is and what the weapon is. And so I would like to study more about that, because we kind of got into a nerdy conversation on the break.
Well, Ashley, I was confused. I didn't know that there are people that actually don't want firearms in museums, that there are parents that don't want their kids to see the history and how firearms molded our country.
Well, I think a lot of it is misunderstanding and misinformation that's out there. I mentioned there aren't a lot of people who are trained in museums and firearms. And so from my consulting business perspective, when you go into a collection, there are, safety concerns. How do you check to see if that object is loaded? Because a lot of times they are. There are security concerns. There are legal concerns, which we spoke about at length at the symposium of, the fact that firearms collections are regulated the same way that civilians are regulated with firearms. And so there are a lot of those things that you have to kind of get through if you're, have to have guns in your collection, and then how do you interpret it? But, the thing that I always come back to is the fact, though, that they are still really publicly popular. I think we just need to help, and that's what this symposium is about, help get some of the people working in those institutions to feel empowered, to have the tools to communicate that effectively for people so that they, can learn about firearms history and make their own conclusions.
So true. And there is, especially having the university professor there, he brought such a unique flavor to it because he's an educator and he's educating about the form, the function, the design, right? Because they're an art museum, or they're an art school.
Yeah.
And so he's choosing the firearm as sort of the thing that he's teaching his students about the artwork, the the tooling that has to go to make the mechanics work together and that sort of thing. And I really applaud him for his efforts.
Well, and Ben and I go way back. Ben Nicholson with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and he's also doing a program at Cornell, I think. He's been a major champion of the study of firearms, and one of the reasons why he's doing the classwork on design is because of a conversation that we had about the fact that where are the John Moses Brownings? Where are the William Masons? Where are these designers in today's firearms manufacturing? And so it's not the traditional route. Normally it's traditionally through engineering, but you get some design art students thinking about it. And my fiance and I, when I went and spoke at the Art Institute years ago, we spoke to that class, the first year of that class.
Oh, awesome.
And it was really interesting in Chicago to hear, everyone's background with or without firearms and their interest in the course. And so we need more people like Ben to get that programming out there, because it is effective. It is really, popular, and it does give people an avenue to study this into the future so that, 50 years from now, when, all the firearms museum professionals, aren't around or are retired, there are people who are kind of carrying the story on.
Very good. Well, we have to break for just a minute, but you'll stick around?
Yes.
Awesome. We still have so much more to talk about with Ashley Hlebinsky. She is the museum curator for the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. It's the first time I've said that without reading it, I think.
Woohoo.
I know.
You're learning.
Stick around.
We shall not sleep, no puppies roam.
Don Collier here, letting you know that you won't get fool's gold at Pot of Gold Auction. They're the genuine article. Pot of Gold auctions off guns, coins, jewelry, and antiques of every kind. Stop in and see my friends Dan and Cheryl Todd in Avondale, Arizona for some live auction action. Or check them out on the web at potofgoldestate.com.
Auctions take place the first and third Tuesday of every month and are full of a great mix of antiques, collectibles, jewelry, guns, and coins. Visit our beautiful air-conditioned showroom off the I-10 at Dysart Road at 215 East Western Avenue in historic downtown Avondale. You will find a friendly and knowledgeable staff, comfortable chairs, and we even serve free birthday cake at every auction. Or bid from the comfort of your home at potofgoldestate.com. Don't miss out. Everything is gone at potofgoldestate.com.
Hey everybody, this is Joey Rocket Shoes Dillon, world champion gunslinger and Hollywood gun coach. In the Westerns, there's always a good guy and a bad guy, and sometimes the ugly guy. And I always root for the good guy, which is why I'm here to tell you about the good folks over at azfirearms.com. They are straight shooters and always give you the best deal in town. azfirearms.com is the biggest little gun shop in Arizona and have something for every single gun enthusiast. Long guns, pistols, hunting, hunting, military, law enforcement, home protection, you name it. And when you've got some guns to sell or trade in and trade up, azfirearms.com are the folks to see. Geez, they bought a cannon once. They are family-owned and operated, friendly staff, courteous, totally reliable. azfirearms.com will give you the best value for your used guns. So stop in, see my friends Dan and Cheryl Todd at azfirearms.com in Old Town Avondale off the I-10 and Dysart Road, and tell them Joey Rocket Shoes Dillon sent you.
Well, I fly that plane, call the angel flight. Come on, brother, you're with me tonight.
Welcome back to Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, the biggest little gun shop in Arizona. And we are continuing our conversation with Ashley Hlebinsky. Ashley is the curator of the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. And we just recently had the exciting opportunity and honor of being invited to this symposium that you put on, Ashley. It was titled The Ethics of Firearms in Museums, but so many topics were covered in the span of, 2.5 days, 3 days?
3 days, yeah.
And so many interesting people. And I want to kind of get down into the meat of what we talked about and who was there. But as you're listening out there at home, or you're driving down the road, working in the yard, whatever you're doing, I want you to really consider why we in the Second Amendment community should be supporting our local museums, because they're really on the front lines of helping people just be in the presence of firearms in a historical setting, kind of far removed from all of the noise that the media shoves in our ears about their opinions about this tool. Museums allow us to see them just be. They just are. And consider what would happen if we sterilized our museums of anything unpleasant that's happened in American history or world history. So there is a real reason to be supporting our museums with our attention, with visiting with our children, to pass that along with our donation dollars, all those things. So let's go to the symposium. This is the second year.
Yes.
And you had a lot of the same people come back, which to me spells success.
Yeah.
It must have been time well spent to travel across the country and across the world.
Well, that was what was so interesting last year when I got the idea to do the symposium, and we sent out the kind of notifications to all these different institutions, and we thought maybe we'd get about half responses of yes, and everybody said yes, and we went, oh no.
Yeah. Now what do we do? It's real.
And we realized from this symposium that, we never really had an avenue to talk before. We all go to our conferences, AAM and the Western Museums Association. We all go to these conferences, as firearms museum professionals, there, but we never get to talk to one another. And this was the only time, as far as we know, ever in the United States when these people that study firearms from different disciplines were able to come together and talk about opportunities and limitations of interpreting firearms in museums in the 21st century. So yeah, we had a lot of people come back, and we also had them come back because we are forming an association.
Yes.
Yes.
And you are the newly elected president.
Yes, I
Congratulations.
am. Now, hopefully I could come up with a name for it. That'd be great. But we are creating an association of firearms museum professionals and academic historians, because we recognize that there is a gun or a gun-related artifact in pretty much every museum in the country. There are very few people who are trained in that, and there are very few avenues that you can go through graduate school that allow you to study firearms. And so we want to create an association that will, train up other museum professionals that may not be as knowledgeable in the laws and the safety and the handling of firearms. So we want to train those people up. We want to start putting more coursework in. Like we mentioned, we have a professor that's already doing that. More coursework on the material culture of firearms, and not just the legal and political history of firearms, but the material culture of firearms, and then also continue this kind of academic scholarship within our own world. We kind of realized that, if we didn't necessarily have a seat at the table, we'd make our own table, and really legitimize our field in a way that it hasn't been in the past, so that when we are, talking to other academic scholars, it's an equal footing. And so we're really excited about getting that going. We had our first publication come out from last year's symposium.
It's gorgeous.
It's pretty.
It really is.
And we'll be doing a second one based on the symposium this year. And so we are excited to get the association running and then take the symposium on the road. We want to go to other museums and other institutions to reach different audiences, because the format for the symposium right now is to have a public day where people can, come and hear about the institutions or hear about specific scholarship. And then we break into private workshops where everyone feels comfortable talking about, legal issues and, safety concerns and interpretation questions in kind of a closed door session and room. And then we publish kind of the summary of that in our journal, which is available to the public.
It's such important work. It really is. I mean, even considering that, suppose you're a small museum and maybe you've got 2 firearms in there, and one day you get a visit from the ATF, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, that's not just like having Lincoln's chair.
Yeah.
It's like there's a whole different series of things that have to take place for us to even possess that thing and store that thing.
Well, and it's, it's not even federal law too. It's state law as well, and we were talking about the running joke throughout the symposium about legal matters is the 1898, kind of cutoff for antiques, which means they're not firearms legally federally. But then there are states that do have that concern, and the Colonial Williamsburg curator had mentioned, muzzle loaders in New Jersey, and that there was some legal, I'm not sure of the specifics of it, but there are some legal things that you have to deal with there. And so you might be in the clear, federally, but your state or your city may have some restrictions that you have to be aware of as a museum. And in our institution, we have someone whose job it is to manage our FFL to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. And so that's it's probably one of the less sexy topics of the symposium, but it's a really relevant one. And I actually moderated that panel. We talked about the fact that England has a museum firearms license, and we talked about the fact that the federal firearms license, separates out pawnbrokers and dealers, but there is nothing in the FFL for museums. So we kind of have to conform to other FFL licenses, and we can do it, but should there be something that gives museums amnesty into owning and preserving firearms through all of history? And then the other side of that, though, is how do you define a museum? So it's not a simple answer, but it's certainly something we need to be talking about.
So amen to all of that. And, it really is a complicated and multi-layered series of conversations and issues. And one of the things that I found interesting that we touched on earlier in the other segment we were talking is that in that room, you had people from every realm of the political spectrum.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, but our combined focus where we joined together was, we don't want history of any kind
exactly
to be sterilized, to be squashed, to be forgotten. And so just balancing, even some of the side conversations got, interesting because we are coming at things from a different political view, but very respectful. I think that's an amazing thing when that can happen, especially now when everything seems so volatile. Anytime you can find a common ground is amazing. But, a lot of people who are learned and they've gone through university and they've got multiple degrees, and I don't want to generalize, but a lot of people that go through that pathway do tend to lean liberal, politically speaking. And so they're probably facing a little bit of cognitive dissonance with trying to figure out, so how do I balance this,
yeah.
right? And I felt like everybody that I met was doing an amazing job of really keeping the focus on the importance of preserving history. But, that's something that we have to think about on our side of the fence, that conservative side, the side that always wants to think that all gun things and Second Amendment things belong to us. Right? And we start throwing, things around like, oh, those liberals and stuff like that. Stop it.
We had the liberal gun guy there.
We did. We did. And there are a lot of people out there that ascribe to liberal politics, but yet still value history and still value our Second Amendment. So we need to be more careful with how we approach that and make it a more, us thing. It's a we thing.
Well, and with museums now, museums have different missions, but at least at our museum, we are a non-advocacy, apolitical institution. Now, we're not, totally immune to our own personal biases.
Sure.
I mean, no one is.
Sure.
But, we take the approach of we interpret firearms history good, bad, and indifferent.
Yes.
And that we feel that we need to tell all those stories when they're relevant. We don't, make the stories, one way or the other, but if it's relevant on a specific timeline, then we're going to tell that story. And I think what was interesting with our symposium, as you pointed out, everybody came from a different political background there. And that was something that kind of shocked me. The first symposium we did last year was I had everybody go around the room and, kind of introduce themselves. And, I was familiar with the curator of the U.S. Marshals Museum, who has a Facebook page called The Liberal Gun Guy. But, we had an academic scholar who, took the microphone and said, I am a liberal feminist who studies women's empowerment through hunting. And
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to me to see.
It's like a collision of worlds for a lot of us.
And with the fact that everybody feels that firearms history is necessary to preserve and to understand, I just think is really, really great. And so if you can have from the most liberal to the most conservative people in the room all come together on something and find common ground to interpret firearms history so that the public, because our deal is the public can make their own decision on it. It's not my job to tell you what to think. It's my job to give you the tools to make an informed conclusion. And the fact that we can kind of all come together and do that, I think is fantastic.
It is fantastic. So we're about out of time, but I definitely want to just touch briefly on all of the amazing additions that you guys are putting in over there with your renovations. And I also want to be sure that if there's anybody out there listening going, this symposium is right up my alley. I'm a museum curator. I need this information, how they can be a part of future symposiums.
Yeah. Well, we are doing we're doing a fully new museum opening next summer. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to centerofthewest.org. It's one of the first panels that you see, especially if you're traveling out there in the next year. You may want to check that and get in touch with me so that we can arrange something because the museum won't look the same until next year. But if anyone wants to know what we're doing, feel free to contact me through the website and we'll hook you up.
That is fantastic. Thank you for all that you do. You are such a powerful and impactful presence and voice for history and for firearms and for young women who may not know that, you can be a museum curator and not talk with your upper lip.
Well, and here I've been told I'm like a 50-year-old man, so there we go.
I don't think you're a 50-year-old man.
Oh, thank you.
You need to get a mirror.
Not even close.
Get a mirror, quick. Anyway, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And tell folks once again how they can find out more about the museum and follow the work that you do.
You can go to centerofthewest.org or you can check out our social media. Just look up Cody Firearms Museum and you can find us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Travel safe getting back.
Thanks.
All right. And have a great Memorial Day weekend.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Well, stick around because on the other side of these messages, we have Beth Bauman. Now, Beth Bauman wrote an article recently about measures being taken by the UN to impact gun rights for American citizens. Stick around. We're going to find out about that.
And we're back with Cheryl Todd talking about the huge gun buying event at azfirearms.com. Oh, AZ, I get it, as in Arizona.
Yes, but...
Oh, or AZ, as in everything from A to Z.
Well, yes, that too. But what I'm telling everybody about is that azfirearms.com is having a huge gun buying event to buy your old firearms all across Arizona and everything from A to Z.
That's great news. See, my grandpa left me an old shotgun and it's just sitting on a closet shelf at home, so I can bring that into azfirearms.com and sell my gun. gun?
Absolutely. azfirearms.com buys, sells, trades, and even consigns your old firearms. Any vintage, any style, military, long guns, handguns, hunting, or home protection. Single items or entire collections. We offer the highest value for your used firearms in a safe and friendly environment, staffed by knowledgeable people.
azfirearms.com is in Old Town Avondale off I-10 and Dysart Road. Come on down to the huge gun buying event every day through the end of the month at the biggest little gun shop in Arizona. And for all your firearm and ammo needs, visit azfirearms.com.
I'm Rob Morse from the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. Each week we share stories about men and women who saved lives. Now I am asking you to be a lifesaver as well. The Second Amendment Foundation protects our rights to keep and bear arms. They defend our rights in courts from coast to coast. Today, they need our help. Please go to saf.org and join the Second Amendment Foundation. That's saf.org.
Don Collier here, letting you know that you won't get fool's gold at Pot of Gold Auction. They're the genuine article. Pot of Gold auctions off guns, coins, jewelry, and antiques of every kind. Stop in and see my friends Dan and Cheryl Todd in Avondale, Arizona for some live auction action. Or check them out on the web at potofgoldestate.com.
Well, I fly that plane, call the angel flight. Come on, brother, you're with me tonight.
Welcome back to Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. Well, we are celebrating Memorial Day as we are sitting in the studio on Memorial Day. And even though you'll be listening to this a few days later when we get it all posted up and aired out there, I think that it's important to stop and consider and remember what this day is about and why our history is important to us. Like our last guest, Ashley Hlebinsky, is the curator of a firearms museum. We need to protect and preserve our firearms museums and museums that have firearms in them from the political nonsense that goes on. Got to think about that when we place votes out there that affect firearms, because certain cities aren't even allowed to have firearms in them, whether it's a museum or not. So let's be mindful of those things. And moving forward today, we have Beth Bauman. Now, Beth is our next guest. She is the social media writer at Town Hall Media, where she runs evening and weekend social media for the network. She also contributes frequently to Town Hall's notebook section and Twitchy. Beth recently wrote an article about measures being taken by the UN to impact the gun rights of citizens in our country, American citizens. Welcome to the show, Beth.
Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl.
Well, I'm excited. My husband, Dan, is here as well.
Hi, Beth. Welcome.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm disturbed after reading some of the stuff about the UN here. I'm anxious to talk to you about this.
Yeah. The saddest part about this whole thing is no one is really talking about it, and that's exactly what they want, is for it to kind of be left through the cracks and nobody will notice because we're too busy dealing with other quote-unquote more important things.
Mm-hmm. Right. I saw a picture here, and it has a woman, and it says her title is High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, and that just gave a chill in my backbone.
Yeah, up until I kind of found this story, I just happened to stumble across it, that the UN had posted just, hey, here's kind of what she said. I didn't even know that title existed, and just like with you, it gave me the chills. I mean, that says everything in itself of what the UN is trying to do. The fact that they have the word disarmament in her title, that is her whole goal and job.
Well, she needs to be fired. I'm reading something that says, according to the United Nations, gun violence can be tracked back to lack of adequate legislation and regulation on gun control, and insufficient ability to enforce existing laws, youth unemployment, and lack of job opportunities.
And this is what the UN is concerned about in our country?
So it's interesting because they word it in a way to where they make it sound like it's a global problem. It's something they're worried about around the world. But it's very obvious that they're talking specifically about America. Where else? There's no other place in the world where we have a Second Amendment or the right to keep and bear arms. So I think their logic is if they can take down America, if they can take down our Second Amendment, then everybody else will fall into place. If they can take down the biggest superpower in the world, then they can take down anybody.
That sounds like, why don't they reword that to just control? Isn't that what it's all getting down to? The United Nations control?
Yeah, and the way I think about it is when I think of this whole situation, I almost get pictures of my mind of Nazi Germany and North Korea where everybody follows in line. They walk side by side, step by step. And they want America to do the same thing. They want America to get in line with the agenda and with every other nation in the world. And their biggest obstacle is guns because no other country has this right. And it's very interesting because it's exactly what our founding fathers were fearful of.
Exactly.
Right, so that kind of is like if they make every country the same, then it's going to be easier for them to control because everybody's the same.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
So how has the UN utilized gun control groups to advocate for what you write about, this Agenda 2030? Like, what is Agenda 2030, first of all?
Agenda 2030 is this notion that basically the world should kind of be the same, that there should be peace and prosperity, and we should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
Good luck with that, ever.
Yeah, it's a very utopian kind of idea that we're all brothers and sisters in the world, and we should all get along and care about the environment. And I personally equate it to, being kind of like hippies who sit around and smoke pot and harm no one.
That's awesome.
Getting that done would be like saying getting Iraq and some of these other countries to be along with all of us, like getting criminals to quit being criminals. It's not going to happen. And when we take our guns away, we don't have any options except to surrender.
Exactly. And I mean, asking people like ISIS to put down the machetes and to come and sit and be friends with people they hate is just unrealistic. It's great in theory, but horrible in practice. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants to send their sons and daughters to a foreign country to fight for peace and prosperity. But that's part of our human nature, is a desire for more power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's just unrealistic. So that's what Agenda 2030 is. There are people who write about it constantly. I can't even keep up just because of all the crazy stuff they push. But basically, they're trying to push this gun control agenda by using gun control groups like Every Town and Moms Demand Action. And so their logic is it makes more sense to use Americans to push for this agenda than it is for the UN, because then it looks like Americans want it. It looks like we made this decision to get rid of our Second Amendment rights to quote unquote be safer, and it's more powerful that way. So really, a lot of these gun control zealots are nothing but political pawns.
That's
and
so true. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say they want to change what makes America different and unique, which is our First Amendment and our Second Amendment, which set us apart from every other nation in the world.
It doesn't make sense to me. If I'm going to go into a bad area of town because I have to, I'm going to leave my gun at home because it's safer than for me to carry. This doesn't make sense to me. I mean, somebody needs to wake up.
Well,
it doesn't make sense at all, especially if you're someone who wants to protect yourself. You're more likely to need that when you're outside of your home than when you're in. And when they say things like, oh, just lock it up and leave it in a safe and, you know, it'll do good there. What about if, you know, someone breaks into my home while I'm here? I'm not going to tell the robber, hey, stop 1 second, let me go and get my gun out of the safe, and then you can continue.
Yeah, but
so
then
there's a lot of there's a lot of issues, you know?
They paint stories like, oh, that never happens, though, right? It's like,
you know, Beth,
you know,
this is only 12 years away, and you know, the UN has influenced a lot of our import laws and other type of things that we already have restrictions on guns. And so this is very scary. 12 years away from now, they want this to be a gun-free planet.
Exactly. And
or controlled by them.
And they must know that they have quite a bit of work to do, because originally it was 2020 or 2021, Agenda 20, I believe it was 2020. And so they pushed it back. So it's important that we fight it.
You know, the United States is the only country that people, I mean, it seems to me that the people want to come here because they like our ways. And now the UN is wanting to make us like all the others. It doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-mm. No. And I was going to say, anything that starts with the word agenda makes me kind of want to do like in Austin Powers and put my pinky up next to my mouth and go, Agenda 2030.
Beth, she's actually doing that as we speak.
So I did. I'll admit it. So what steps should gun owners and those that are passionate about protecting the Second Amendment, what should we do to make sure that the UN's anti-gun stance does not become a reality in America?
Well, obviously the first thing and the most important thing is to register and to vote. We have the power to influence our government by picking who we have in Congress who represents us. Obviously, gun owners are a powerful voting bloc. We saw it in 2016. We're passionate. We get out. We vote. But not only that, but we need to find other like-minded folks and get them to do the same thing. If each of us pick 2 or 3 people we know who are passionate about their rights, but might not necessarily care about the political side, the candidates and stuff, and help them work them through that, that's huge. Being an outspoken and unapologetic supporter, it is so important to stand up and say, I'm a gun owner, I'm law-abiding, I practice my Second Amendment, I'm passionate about it, and I'm not going to be apologetic for it. That's especially important when we see things like school shootings where everybody instantly comes and tries to attack us and make it sound like we ourselves pulled the trigger. I've had myself feel almost ashamed that I'm a gun owner because people look at me and say, well, it's people like you who do this. And we need to remind ourselves it's not our fault. We have not done anything wrong, and it's okay to want to preserve something secret.
Amen. Amen.
And then the other big thing is to help new shooters and help them find their voice. When people are first really getting kind of into guns and their Second Amendment, there's a little bit of fear or intimidation by people who know more. And we need to encourage people to say it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to admit you don't know everything. We all have to start somewhere.
And you got to, keep in mind. I'm sorry, Beth. But we got to keep keep in mind that there are people that are on the fence, and we can influence those people by showing them guns and taking them out shooting and going through the experience.
Yep. Absolutely. And we are unfortunately out of time. Can you, just as we go out, tell folks how they can follow all of your work and get a hold of that article that we're talking about where the UN is trying to impact and influence our gun rights here in America?
Absolutely. You can find me on townhall.com under the notebook section. I frequently write about Second Amendment issues and legislation. I'm on Twitter at EB454 and on Facebook, Beth Bauman.
Very good. Thank you so much, Beth Bauman.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know it. We're going to have you back on again, and we'll see you at the NSSF Summit in a week from now, I think. So I'm looking.
Yeah, can you believe it's already next week?
I know. I'm so excited. We'll get to meet in person finally. So
finally.
Thank you so much. Travel safe, and we'll see you soon.
You too.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay, we still have our second hour coming up, so do not move a muscle. We've got a great lineup of speakers. They are speakers, really, right? Lineup of guests, our Responsibly Armed Citizen Report, and Dan's commentary.
When you're working hard to beat debt, you've got to think of creative ways to get your income up. Here's an idea. Sell some stuff at auction. Start with locally owned and operated potofgoldestate.com. The owners, Dan and Cheryl Todd, have over 60 years of combined experience in selling antiques, collectibles, guns, coins, and jewelry. And over their many years in business, they've earned the trust of thousands of people just like you. Whether you're saving for a rainy day emergency fund or paying down debt, let potofgoldestate.com help you get the extra cash you need. Potofgoldestate.com will purchase your items outright, or you can consign them to their twice-a-month online auction. Pot of Gold's nationwide online auction is a great place to get top dollar for your collectibles. They specialize in everything from antiques, coins, high-end collectibles, to cars, boats, guns, and more. Get started today at potofgoldestate.com, or visit them off I-10 and Dysart Road in historic Avondale for some live auction action. For more information, visit potofgoldestate.com. That's potofgoldestate.com.
Hey ladies, Cheryl Todd here from azfirearms.com. Many of us ladies